We are in lesson 3 of a new series called Wilderness Deception. And the reason why we're talking about this is because so often we think of our wilderness as being very, very bad, a bad place. I'm miserable because I'm single. I'm miserable because I don't have money. I'm miserable because I don't have a house. I'm miserable because and we just go through all of these times in our life, and we're just miserable, and we're going through the wilderness a wrong way. So what we're trying to say is that I think we're deceived into thinking that the wilderness is a bad place, when in fact, I think it's actually the best place that you and I can ever go through, because it's one of those places, if you make the decision to turn and follow God, it's a good place because you spend more time praying, you spend more time reading your Bible, you spend more time growing in your relationship with Him. So the wilderness can push you towards God or away, and we're hoping that you'll see that pushing towards Him is the best way to handle that. So, last week, we're picking up, this is a series on the life of Moses. We have not even met Moses yet, so we're going to do that today, which is kind of cool. But last week, we did this historical timeline because we want people to see why Moses even came on the scene in the first place. Like, what was the point to his life, and what does that even matter to us? So last week, we did this whole timeline, and we ended with the Israelites, the Hebrews, as you and I know them today, the Jewish people, they're stuck at this particular time in the lesson in Egypt. And they've been there for 430 years. They got there. You can go last week's lesson and find out how they got there, but they're stuck there. The thing is that they have a homeland, a land promised to them from Abraham 400 years before. And they want to get back there, but they can't because Pharaoh has them as slaves. They're very, very mistreated. They're forced into very hard labor. They have a very, very difficult life. They've had 430 years of their own wilderness, and it's been really, really tough for them. So I want to start with Exodus 9. And we'll kind of pick up the story there. Exodus 9, Pharaoh is speaking here. And it should go up on the screen, maybe. There we go. Look, Pharaoh said, he said to the people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So here we see Pharaoh is terrified because when the Israelites moved to Egypt, there was 75 of them. Now there are over 2 million of them. And Pharaoh's scared because this is a big people group that if they turned on him, he'd lose his workforce. There'd be a lot of issues with that. So he comes up with a plan. And it's a plan born out of fear, and it's a very, very bad plan. Verse 15, then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, of whom one was named Shiphrah, the other Puah, when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. Now, I want you to imagine that being your job. Like, you work for Pharaoh, you work for the king of Egypt, and he tells you, this is your job, kill these children. And you have a choice like, if I don't kill them, he's going to kill me. And then you've got all these issues going on in your life. But they didn't care because they trusted God. And they loved him more than they loved their job and their life. So, verse 17, we'll pick it up. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. And then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwife answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own, and Pharaoh gave them this order to all the people. Every boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Now, this is the world that little baby Moses was born into. This world just wrought with fear of a leader. This literally made me laugh. Ronnie Shake said this. His fear wasn't so much what Pharaoh's was, but this was his fear. He said, I fear that one day I'll meet God, he'll sneeze, and I won't know what to say. Now think about that. I don't know why I thought that was funny. I could just picture that, like God sneezes and you go, God bless you. Well, wait a minute. That doesn't work either. So anyway, all right, I told you the hardest part of my life up here is telling you stupid jokes, okay? And this is hard. So whenever I tell a joke and it's stupid, you need to laugh anyway, and that'll just make me feel better, all right? All right, so this summer, before we started, I started reading a book by Adam Hamilton called Moses in the Footsteps of a Reluctant Prophet. So he actually has this video series. Now, as I was reading it, I was looking at all these really cool pictures of Egypt. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. I want to go to Egypt. So we did our Luke series and we went to Israel. So my thought was we're going to go to Egypt and we're going to videotape all this stuff for Bible study. Super excited until two little words came to my brain. ISIS and terrorism. And I was like, oh, they're ruining my life, okay? But thankfully, before ISIS and terrorism came into that country, Adam Hamilton could go over there and he videotaped the series. Now, we were able to get permission to put one of his first videos on our video, and we're going to watch it here for the first few minutes, because here's what I want to do. I want you to see the world that Moses was born into, because when you see that, it'll give us a bigger picture of what's going on now. Watch for like what Pharaoh is. You're going to see the Nile River, because we're going to go talk about the Nile today. So we'll start there, and then we'll come back and then just work through this. So.
Hi, my name is Adam Hamilton, and I'm excited that you're joining me on this journey in the footsteps of Moses. As we traverse the land where Moses walked, we see the things that Moses saw, and we join him in taking the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt and to the Promised Land. It's going to be an exciting adventure. So, let's begin. I'm so excited about this journey with you to Egypt. And I just want to remind you, these videos are meant to accompany the book. And the book will tell you more about the story of Moses, give you the historical background, and help us understand what does Moses' life mean for us today. In these videos, my primary purpose is simply to take you to Egypt and to allow you to see the things that Moses would have seen, to walk in his footsteps, and perhaps for those experiences to help us understand Moses' story more completely. We'll begin our journey visiting the two most iconic and most visited sites in all of Egypt, the pyramids at Giza and the great temples at Luxor, what was in Moses' time the Egyptian capital city of Thebes. Now, Giza is a major Egyptian city approximately 12 miles south of central Cairo. It's really part of the southern edge of Cairo. On its western edge, bordered by the city on one side and the desert on the others, are the pyramids of Giza and the Great Sphinx. These pyramids and the Sphinx were built around 2500 BC, more than 1,000 years before the time of Moses. They were located near the ancient capital of Memphis and were built as the burial chambers for and monuments to the pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. Khufu's pyramid is the largest and first built, usually referred to as the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's the only remaining of the structures named by Antipater of Sidon in the 2nd century BC as one of the 7 wonders of the world. For 3,800 years, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. It's estimated that the Great Pyramid took as long as 20 years to complete. It was originally 481 feet tall and is built from over 2 million blocks of stone, carved across the Nile River and brought over 5 miles to the location of the pyramids. Some wrongly believe the Israelites built the pyramids, but these pyramids were here long before there were Israelites. Abraham likely saw these pyramids when he sojourned in Egypt. So the pharaohs built the pyramids as their burial chambers. And to stand here and to actually have a chance to touch these stones, and you realize 4,600 years ago, the slaves who were cutting these rocks out of the mountain across the other side of the Nile, bringing them here and installing them in this location. And when Abraham arrived in Egypt, as Genesis describes, this pyramid would have been here. It was standing 600, maybe 800 years before Abraham ever arrived on the scene. When Joseph arrives in Egypt, he sees the same pyramid we're seeing today. And Moses, of course, grew up in the shadow of the pyramids. He would have seen them many, many times across the course of his life. So in the 3rd century before Christ, when the Greeks came and they began exploring Egypt and Egyptian culture and all of the things that were here, they found the pyramids, but they were buried mostly in sand. There was just a little tiny portion of the pyramids on the top. And you can imagine what it was like as they were uncovering all of these amazing finds. So as we stand here before the pyramids, we have the Sphinx. Has the body of a lion and the face of a man, and the face of this particular Sphinx is Khafren, the man whose pyramid is right behind it, and he is the protector of this necropolis where the kings are buried here. So this is the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids of Giza. Now, what do these pyramids have to do with Moses? The story of Moses is the story of an epic battle between Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and an 80-year-old stuttering sheepherder who demanded the release of the Israelite slaves. The pyramids begin to help us see just how formidable Moses' opponent was. They point to the fact that the pharaohs were considered chosen by the gods and typically semi-divine. Their ability to commission such massive monuments built for their own glory and death, monuments not seen on this scale anywhere else in the world, tells us just how powerful they were. Now, I'd like to take you from the pyramids at Giza to what was the capital city when Moses was born, the ancient city of Thebes, but what is today known as Luxor. Now, by the time of Moses, pharaohs were no longer building pyramids. They were building massive temples. Egypt's largest and most famous is the Karnak Temple, one of the largest temple complexes in the world. It was begun 500 or 600 years before Moses was born, and each pharaoh added to this colossal structure. While ostensibly built to honor the gods, these buildings seem focused on honoring the pharaohs and declaring their greatness. The exterior walls of the temples feature glorious and often exaggerated battle scenes with the pharaohs defeating their enemies. Throughout the temples are giant columns and walls covered in bas-reliefs of the pharaohs making offerings to the gods. Statues of the pharaohs like these further point to the glory of the kings of Egypt. Located nearby is the Valley of the Kings. And it's fascinating to travel through the Valley of the Kings. We weren't allowed to take cameras into this place, but as you go into the Valley of the Kings, you have a chance to see the burial places that were prepared for the pharaohs. From the time they first became king, they would commission their burial chambers. And it might take 20 or 30 years to complete these chambers. And all of the pharaohs that would have been a part of the Exodus story were buried in this location, in the Valley of the Kings. The other magnificent building in Luxor, in the city of Luxor itself, is the Luxor Temple. And best visited by night, it's magnificent. And as you walk through this building, it becomes crystal clear that the central focus here is on the pharaohs. It's thought that this temple was dedicated to the cult of the pharaohs, and it may have been here that most of the pharaohs were coronated, where they were imbued with divinity. And that's how it was understood, that the pharaoh at their coronation was imbued with divinity and became a semi-divine being, a sort of incarnate God, so both human and yet also in some sense divine. And in this role, as a semi-divine being, the pharaoh was an intermediary between the gods and humanity. The divine status of the kings was celebrated year after year after year. Depending on when Moses was born, it's likely that Moses was born in the city of Thebes and that he grew up in this area, so that all of the things you've just seen are things that Moses would have grown up seeing, or at least many of them, the ones that were completed in his time. And so this was Moses' proverbial stomping grounds. Thebes would also have been the place where Moses studied, where he learned as a part of Pharaoh's household. He would have been taught in the areas of Egyptian philosophy, theology, science, economics, law, religion. All of these things Moses would have been trained in the city of Thebes. And while he no doubt traveled all across the rest of the country, this was undoubtedly home for him. And here, Acts 7:22 tells us that Moses learned everything Egyptian wisdom had to offer. I'd like to end by taking you to the Nile River at Luxor. Now, there's no overstating the importance of the role of the Nile in life for the Egyptian people. It was life. The scripture tells us that Pharaoh had become nervous over the growth of the Hebrew population in Egypt, for reasons I mentioned in the book. Consequently, he commanded that the boys born to the Hebrew women be put to death, that the boy children be thrown into the Nile River and killed. Moses' mother had managed to hide her son until he was 3 months old, and then she had a plan. Knowing the location of where Pharaoh's daughters bathed along the Nile, she placed her son in a basket at just the right time in the hope that Pharaoh's daughter would see her child, have compassion, and take him home. The Israelite slaves, many of them, most of them lived in the land of Goshen, but undoubtedly throughout the land of Egypt there were Israelite slaves. And it was here that the royal family lived, so this scene likely unfolds right here in Luxor. Taking a boat ride upon the Nile today is a magnificent experience. We took a small boat out at, just before sunset, and as we were cruising down the Nile, just so peaceful, beautiful, and the scenes that you see all around you, I imagine this is very much what life looked like 3 millennia ago when Moses was living. You find the farmers scattering their seed, the fishermen fishing, the reeds growing on the banks of the Nile, and somewhere along this beautiful river, I imagine a young woman taking her little boy, placing him in a papyrus basket, setting him among the reeds where Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe, hoping, weeping, praying that she might have compassion on her son and take him up, draw him out of that basket and out of the river, take him to be her own son and give him a future. Little did she know that day as she stood near the reeds watching, that her son would grow up to become the great deliverer whom God would use to set his people free from slavery and take them to the promised land.
Yay, isn't that so cool? So sad I don't get to go. I want to go see that. All right. So now that we understand that whole thing, now we see why Pharaoh is such a big deal. So when Pharaoh says something, you do it. What interested me most is that they really believe he was part God. So it's interesting when you start realizing the impact that the pharaohs had. So you can kind of see when he was nervous about the Israelites, why this was such a big deal. Now, on the scene steps a very, very, very pregnant woman. And this woman, her faith would actually change the course of history. And if I were to ask you her name, do most people know it? Okay, thank you. And I'll tell you why I didn't know it. Here's why. I got invited to a baby shower. Now, this is how I like to go to a baby shower. I like to go and I like to eat. And then I like to watch them open presents, and then I like to eat some more. And then I need them to have cake so I can eat some more. So for me, a baby shower is all about food, okay? It has nothing to do with games. I hate games when you play them at the baby thing, so that's just me. But we went to a baby shower probably a year and a half ago before I even studied this. Now, this is why I know that most people don't know the name of Moses' mother, because one of the games that they had must have been called like Baby Shower Jeopardy, okay? Never seen it before. Here you go. You guys can't see this over here. This is going to be awkward. Okay. Anyway, they had all of these categories set up, okay? And they were like nursery rhymes. They were like children of famous actors, all this. And so you could choose like 100, 200, 300. Okay, so one of the categories, mothers of the Bible, okay? Now, my team knew I taught Bible. So they pretty much thought we were going to be a shoo-in and we were going to win this game. So let's start. 100. Who's the mother of Jesus? Okay, 200. Who's the mother of John the Baptist? 300. Who's the mother of Samuel? Hannah. Mother of Cain and Abel? Yep. Guess what's under 500? Mother of Moses. Guess who lost for their team? That would be me. I had no idea. I was like, I don't know. I literally don't know her name because you don't hear of her, which is so weird because she literally changed the course of history. And so that's the only game that I would have liked because it was the only thing that had to do with Bible. But anyway, here's what we learn about her. Her name is Jochebed. And what's the great part about her is that she steps out in faith and she does something and has to trust God for something that she cannot do on her own. Because what she can't do is save the life of her child. Remember, she's born, her child is going to be born into a place where little boys are being drowned in the Nile. And so if you really think that through, you think that has to be a terrifying time. So the only thing she can do is trust that God will take care of something that she can't. Now, I thought this was cute. There was a group of tourists who were visiting this really picturesque town. And this one tourist came up to an old man sitting there, and he said in a rather patronizing way, "Were there any great men born in this village?" And the old man said, "No, only babies." Okay, now, as weird as that is, it's true. All great men and women start as babies. And we forget that part of it. And the same with Moses. He started as a little teeny tiny baby. 1525 BC, 1525 years before Jesus comes on the scene. Exodus 2 verse 1 says this: "Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman. We know her name to be Jochebed, and her husband's name is Amram." We don't hear too much about him. They have 2 kids already. Miriam is probably around 6, the daughter. They have a little son named Aaron, and he's probably around 3, and now Moses is going to be born. Verse 2, "And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son." Now, automatically, you know the fear that comes into her life when he comes out and she realizes it's a boy. No ultrasound machines, no nothing. They have no idea what this child is going to be up to this point. It is an automatic death sentence for her son. I heard from a woman, people email me all the time, and she was telling me a story about how she's having a really hard time in life. And the reason for it is because she's trying to raise boys. She's a single mom. She's trying to run her own business. She's just having a hard time doing it all. And she said, "I feel like a failure most of the time." And so I wrote her back and I said, "Here's what I want you to think. I want you to pretend your body has holes all over it. And like, here's a hole of compassion, here's a hole of patience, here's a hole of I just don't have enough time. And then I want you to turn around and say, all right, God, here's the deal. I have all these holes that I can't fill on my own. Now I'm asking you to fill those holes for me. Because I don't have enough patience, but you're going to have to give it to me. I don't have enough compassion, you're going to have to give it to me. God, I need you to fill what I can't do." And that's exactly where we find Jochebed. She has a hole, and her hole says this: "I cannot protect my son from death. Because if a soldier sees him or hears him crying, he's going to come in, pick him up, drown him in front of my eyes. And that will be the most horrifying picture for the rest of my life." So the only thing she could do is step out and trust God and see if he would save her child for her. The verse goes on to say, when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Now, it's so funny to me because we just forget about little children and trying for 3 months to make sure a baby doesn't cry. Think about that. They cry all the time. 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 7 o'clock. The one time you need peace to make dinner. Nope. Babies cry, scream the whole time. That's just what they do. And so we forget that this is a real baby, and at any sound that he makes, you can imagine Miriam and Aaron, they're trying desperately to keep him quiet all of this time. But Hebrews, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, sheds some light on the faith of their mother and father. Look at Hebrews 11:23. "Prompted by faith, Moses, after his birth, was kept concealed for 3 months by his parents, because they saw how comely the child was," and here's the key: "they were not overawed and terrified by the king's decree." Now that amazed me when I read that, because I thought, how is it that they weren't afraid that the soldiers would come in and kill their son? And I really think it's because they had a really, really good view of God. And I think for you and I, when you and I can get this big view of God, that we believe him for anything and we trust him for anything, we know he can do anything, then we tend to be less and less afraid. The bigger our God gets, the less fear we have with the things in our life. Verse 3, "But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket." Here's our little basket for today. And she coated it with tar and pitch. She placed the child. Here you go. Here's Moses. Moses has blue eyes, and I don't know what that is, okay? But that's his hair, apparently. But, I think we forget that this is a baby. And you think she's been with him for 3 months of his life. And can you imagine you holding your child and saying, "I love you so much. There you go. I'm here, throw him in the river." I mean, we just forget that this is like real life here for this woman. And I think how difficult it would be to say, "Honey, I love you," stick him in the river, and then walk away. That scene just horrifies me. But here's what the parents knew. They had to release him if they wanted him to live. They did all they could do, and then they had to release him to God. And today I want, hopefully, to make one major point here, is that some of you have to release whatever it is in your life that is giving you so much stress, and you need to give it to God. Because a lot of times you're not going to be able to change it. The thing with God is that he expects us to do certain things. And then when we get to a point, we say, I can't do it anymore. God, the rest is up to you. Some of you, for all of us, we've raised our children to the best of our ability. We've said all we could say. For some of us, we've worked really hard at the job. For some of us, we've gone to get medical attention. A lot of you have shared your faith with your husband and your children and your parents. Some of you have cleaned the house and got ready to put it on the market. But once you get to this one point, there's nothing else you can do except sit back and say, God, I can't do anymore. I'm leaving the results to you. For Jochebed, she had to do that. She had to let go of her son and then walk by faith. So I want to talk for a second about what it means to walk by faith. It all has to do with a trapeze. We have a little picture up here of there you go. If you've ever been to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, you've seen them. They fly in the air and they go from one side to the other. So I had this idea to build this trapeze, but then I didn't have any time, and then I thought about this yesterday. And so I woke up at 4:30 this morning, and Rob goes, what do you do in your lesson? And I go, oh, I'm doing this really stupid thing, and I got these little poles, and I'm going to pretend they're a trapeze. And he goes, well, I'll make you one. Okay, here you go. We have our trapeze here, all right, that my husband did bright and early this morning for you. And this is what I want you to look at. This is kind of what it's like to walk by faith. We have three things that we learned by walking by faith. Look at the first thing right here. First, it takes a leap of faith to let go of one bar and reach for the other. When you feel like God is calling you to do something or something, it takes a lot of faith to take this bar. Someone said, hope you don't pull that down. I said, yeah, if I do, I was afraid like a bad word would come out of my mouth or something, and then it would be on camera. So hopefully that doesn't happen. So no, I was joking. But when you're, it's hard to be on the other side of this. Let's try this. Well, it's not going to work any better. Anyway, I don't practice these things. Can you tell that? Apparently not. But for us, a lot of times we cling to stuff. We cling to things. We don't want to release it to God because we're not really sure we trust Him enough. And so, but sometimes when it's time for you and I to get to the point where we can't do any more, we've done talking, we've done doing everything. Now we take it and we release our hands and we jump over here and grab a hold of God's hands. And we say, here's the deal, God, you have to do it now. I'm releasing it to you. For Jochebed, she had to let go right here of her son. Reach over, grab a hold of God's hands and say, God, you have to take care of him now. I can't do it on my own any longer. The second thing is the second picture up there, it will be scary letting go and trusting that person will catch you. If you saw that picture right there, like that guy, she's letting go and that guy better be there to catch her. If not, she's going to go flying to the ground and splat. Okay, so it's really, really important to know who you're getting ready to release and grab a hold of. And it's kind of like for Rob, I trust Rob with my life because I've been married to him for 38 years. So he knows me, I know him. I know that if I release this and grab, he's going to get me. He's going to make sure he gets me. And that's why we always say, you're never going to be able to release things over here and grab a hold of this with God if you don't know Him. And that's why we always say, get the Bible reading programs, start journaling, get to know God really, really well. Because if you get to know Him, then you're going to be way more apt to trust Him. If you just became a Christian like 5 minutes ago, and I say, hey, release that to God, you're going to be like, I don't know Him. So spend the time to get to know Him. Find out what He's like. See that He's faithful. He loves you. He's on your side. He wants to help you. He's a big God. He can do anything that you need Him to do. The third one is you don't have forever to decide to let go and grab the other bar. Jochebed did not have very much time. If she would have kept hanging on to Moses and kept hanging on to him, the soldiers could have come in and killed him right in front of her. At some point, you have to say, I don't have enough time. I need to release it. I need to grab a hold of this and trust that God is going to do something that I cannot do for myself. A lot of people over here are hanging on to stuff, and you know what? You refuse to release it. And because you do, you know what's happening? You're bitter, you're frustrated, you're unforgiving, you're angry, because you're hanging on to stuff that you just don't want to give up. And I'm saying, you know what? If you want to live a life of peace with abundance, you need to release it. God, I'm releasing my husband to you, my singleness to you, my school to you, my job. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to say, God, I'm just going to trust you that you're going to take me where you need me. And I think that there's so much peace when that happens. Here's what faith does not mean. See, up there's movement. Faith does not mean just sitting around doing nothing. You hear people say, I'm just praying about it and just waiting for God to do what he needs to do. Well, you might need to get up and do something. You need to do your part. Like all through the Bible, you see God sending David out to fight a war. He didn't just say, David, sit back and pray and I'll take care of it. He's like, no, get out there and do something. And for some of you, that may be a word for you today. Like go out and do what you need to do and then leave the results when you get to that point up to God. Some of us have to know something like this farmer. This farmer decided to buy a chainsaw. He was told that he could cut 15 trees down with this one particular power saw. A week later, he came to the guy who he bought it from, and he said, this is broken. Like something's wrong with it. He said, I can only cut 3 trees down. And so he gave it to the man, and the man picked it up and pulled the cord, and it started up really loud, and the farmer jumped a foot. And he said, what is that noise? Okay, that's funny. Come on. Okay, I'm done. I'm not telling you jokes anymore. Ever. Okay, that's funny. Okay, but here's my point. The farmer had to learn, like go on some manuals, learn about chainsaws before you buy one, okay? For us, we have to do the same thing. Like he can't just go walk in blindly to someplace. For us, we have to do things like put out our resumes. If you want a job and you say, oh dear God, please give me a job. He's not gonna just bring someone to your door, knock on it, go out and do something. That's part of walking in faith. Some of you have really bad marriages and you need to go to marriage counseling. And you need to start reading some books. You can't just sit around and say, oh, God, change my husband, which is what we do. But instead, we need to say, God, how about change me? Before you even work on him, what do I need to change? What needs to change with me first? Go to some counselors. Go do something. But do something. Part of walking in faith is like if you want your kids to know Jesus, you got to take them to church. You got to talk to them about God. They're not going to just, by osmosis, just learn about him. If you are sick, you need to go to the doctor. Like, that's just what it is. Now, this was funny, but I'm scared to tell you anything now. Like, I'm kind of gun-shy up here at the moment. A doctor calls and he tells his patient, I have some good news and bad news. Good news, you only have a week to live. And he's like, that's good news? What's the bad news? And he goes, yeah, sorry, I forgot to call you last week. I thought that was cute. See, yay, you laugh. Makes me happy when you laugh. But I learned this with the business deal, so don't find doctors like that, apparently, is what the moral of that story is. But here's the deal. When Rob has been working on this business deal for the last year, it has been really hard. And it's been a lot of work for him, and he's up early in the morning, and he's talking to attorneys, and he's dealing with 3 different countries, and he's working really, really hard. But there came a point when he came home one day and he said, Lisa, I'm done. I have done everything that I can do. Hands off. God, if you want this deal to go through, you have to take it across the finish line. I can't. Only you can. And we do our part, but then we turn around and let God do his part. What Jochebed did was not just throw her kid in a basket and throw him into the Nile. She came up with a plan. She did something. Remember, walking by faith is also doing something, thinking, God, what do you want me to do? What's the best plan here? And so she comes up with this idea to put her child in the Nile River in hopes that she would find compassion from a very, very unlikely source, Pharaoh's daughter. Now remember, we saw how Pharaoh, how important he was. And we saw now this is the daughter of Pharaoh. And you say, okay, what are the odds that the very children that Pharaoh is trying to kill is going to like go by, Pharaoh's daughter is going to grab him out and say, oh, I want him for my own. What are the odds of that? And the answer is, they're not good odds at all. Unless you have the God of the universe involved in what you're doing. See, I think she came up with a plan. I think she looked out and she saw every day, she had her little binoculars and she said, okay, Pharaoh's daughter comes out at 6 a.m. And she kept a log. And at 6 a.m. she knew every morning, okay, what time is she near where I need to put the baby? I think she came up with this. She was strategic. She had a time, a place. I bet she coached her daughter, Miriam. Miriam was going to be the little lookout. And she probably coached her like, okay, if you see her, go and say something to her. Like, I think they had this whole thing planned out. And then came that day where she put baby Moses and she put him in the Nile, and she had to turn around and say, God, he's all yours, and now you have to take care of this whole situation, because she had no control over it. You and I do not have control over our children and their salvation. We don't have control over what they do at college. We don't have control over our husbands. We have no control over the things in our life. But God is so big that he does. So I want to ask you, what is in your life that you are clinging to over here that you just don't want to release? And I will tell you what mine is. Mine is money and finances. And this deal that Rob has been working on for the last year of our life was supposed to take care of us for the rest of our life. We knew what it was going to take to do that. I realized that it brought so many of my fears to the surface. Cheyenne said to me one day, she said, Mom, I think this deal that God is working on you more than anyone else. And I said, you know what? I think it's true. See, I want the end of my life to be financially secure. 4 of our children work for us. We need them to be financially secure too. And we knew that this was going to be, so I knew the number in my head, what it was going to be. And this was me hanging on. I want that number. That's what it's going to be. With every day, that number dwindled. This deal was supposed to take 2 months. It took a year. We had planned a certain amount for attorney's fees. It was 7 times that amount. We didn't know for a year we would have to continually pour money into the company, and that's exactly what we had to do. So I kept clinging and crying and being a total little brat. And I would be like, this isn't fair, and God's not fair, and this whole thing is stupid, I hate these people. And yeah, you should have heard me, it was pathetic. And finally one day I said, all right, all done. I think I told you this a couple weeks. I released it, came over here, grabbed a hold of God, and I said, God, here's the deal. I'm just going to trust you for my future. Whatever you give us is apparently what you think we need for the rest of our life. And it won't be, and we know that already. But I'm going to trust you that you're going to take care of us forever. Like, now my trust is gone from me and my bank account to God, because I have no control over what this is all going to be like. I had to let go and release what I wanted. Grace and Mark Driscoll, for those of you that know the Driscolls, they moved here from Seattle. When everything kind of went south for them, Mark wanted to move to California. Grace did not. She said, no, I want to stay in Seattle. And it went on, and finally, she kept saying, I think I'm willing. But then one day she realized, I don't think I'm willing at all. She was clinging to Seattle. And she said, I had to release Seattle and come over here and say, God, wherever you want me. And the minute she released that, then God could start working on her life. And both of them ended up wanting to come to Arizona, and that's how they made it here today. But see, it all becomes a time when you and I become honest with ourselves. We have to have that moment where we're honest, and we say, God, I'm letting go of this, and I'm going to trust you. For some of you, it's your kids. For some of you, it's a dream. You have this dream that you want to do something. Some of you, it's your ministry. Some of you, your marriage, or for me, it was my income. For some of you, it's your health. And we have to do what Jochebed did and release it and say, God, I have no control, and I'm going to give it all up. And God, I'm going to just trust you with it. There is so much peace. I have peace now. Like, you would laugh. I look at our bank account, and that's something that should terrify you. But I said, you know what, God? I'm not worried about this any longer, because I'm trusting you to take care of me. I'm not looking at a number any longer. But I wonder how Jochebed knew to do that. That's a big deal, to throw your child in the Nile down the river. How did she know that? And I started thinking, okay, people say all the time, how does God talk to us? How do we know what he wants us to do? And we know, of course, you read the Bible and he speaks through his word. That's a main thing. But on little things like this, like, do I buy this house or do I buy this house? Or what do I do? Like, how do I make that decision? And sometimes God just plants ideas in our mind. Now, not every idea that is in your mind is from God, trust me, because I know every idea that's in mind is not from God. But you weigh that. You say, okay, God, is this from you? Is this something that, of course, goes along with Scripture? If you get a thought like, oh, I hate my husband and I want to go have an affair. Okay, don't do that, because you know biblically that the Bible doesn't say that. But these are just thoughts that come in your mind, and then they kind of don't go away. It's kind of like someone said one time, it's like if God gives you an idea, you kind of get pregnant with it, and you just keep getting more and more pregnant with it. So she must have thought about this at least for a few months. And so I started thinking about, for some of you today, what is it in your life that God has planted this desire for you to do? What is it? Because everyone has something that God just, all of a sudden you're walking along and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. God, is that from you? And then the more you think about it, for some of you, it's a ministry. And you're like, you know what? I saw what went on in Texas, just like Ginger. Diapers. We got to do diapers. I'm going to start a diaper ministry. And you just say, okay, it's something that God plants in your mind. For some of you, and I hear this all the time, I feel like God wants me to write a book. Write about my story. Write about my life. And I'm like, that's awesome. Some of you, it's God wants you to start a business. For some of you, it's God wants you to adopt a child. He has never told me that. And I'm so thankful, okay? Because I would probably have to say no. I would say, no, I'm sorry. That is not the voice of God by any means for me. But some of you, you have that heart and that passion. That's not my deal, but it could be yours. Some of you want to foster. Maybe God put it on your heart to foster. Some of you, it's like you have businesses and you just like, and God has put it upon your heart to sell it. Others of you, you're dating that guy and God's saying, maybe you should marry him. Might be a good idea to do that. And if you feel like this is God calling you, then you need to take a leap. You need to quit hanging on and go out and do something. And then see what God does with that. Now, here's a little, whatever the thing is called, like a forewarning, I guess is what it is. Some of you are here and you're saying, Lisa, I did that. And the whole thing fell through. Started the business, filed bankruptcy. Started the ministry, nobody showed up. Wrote the book, no one bought it. So yep, way to go for releasing my stuff and giving it to God because this just sucks, okay? I always wonder if you can say that at Bible study. But here's what I want to tell you. 3 things. 1, God's timing may not be right. Like it might be the right thing to do, but it might be next year instead of this year. And maybe he just needs to see, too, how serious you were. How serious are you? Are you really willing to drop this and go over and trust him for something? And 3, maybe you took that step of faith and that's just one step to get to this point, but this point is going to take you to this point, and maybe your dream is something completely different. But by you stepping out and jumping off, even that it went bad, here's what I say, good for you. Good for you that you actually walked by faith. You believed that God was doing something and you stepped out and you did something about it. That's awesome. See, when you feel that God's calling you to do something and it all falls apart, it's not on you, okay? It's his deal. So Jochebed comes up with a plan, steps out in faith. Verse 4, his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe. Her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw a basket among the reeds, sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it up and saw a baby. Oh, remember, he's kind of cute. And she goes, he was crying. She felt sorry for him. And she said, oh, he's one of the Hebrew babies. Now, here's an interesting thought. The Egyptians thought that the Nile River was like one of their gods. And so for Pharaoh's daughter, and we don't know this, but it could be a possibility, I don't think she could have children. If it's the one person that everyone says to think that it probably is historically, because she doesn't have a name. Moses has never given this woman a name. We don't know. She's never named in the Bible. She's always called Pharaoh's daughter. And you think, this is a woman that lived 40 years with Moses and raised him up, and Moses never thinks to give her a name. So historically, but it seems like she doesn't have any children. And so she sees in the Nile a baby, and maybe she thinks the gods are giving her a baby. Who knows how that played out. But suddenly she has a problem. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, so she's like, what am I going to do with this kid? In steps Miriam, the daughter, that I bet mom has just talked to her. Okay, this is what you got to do. And look at what she says. Well, first, I feel like she's, hearing him cry, and then Miriam walks by and says, oh, look how cute he is. Oh, how sad. He's so cute. Oh, he looks so hungry. Look what she says in verse 7. Then the sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Now, what an interesting concept. Now, Pharaoh's daughter was probably like, what am I going to do with this kid? And suddenly Miriam says something like, do you want me to go and get a mom since he's going to be your kid? Like, she just took it for granted that Pharaoh's daughter is going to like want him. And then there's that moment. You have that moment where you're just like guilty or innocent, and you could just imagine Miriam's heart beating, and Jochebed's got her little binoculars and like praying the whole time, God, what's happening? And then she says this, verse 8, yes, Pharaoh's daughter says, go. And the girl went and got the baby's mother, Miriam's mom, Jochebed. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. And the question is, what are the odds of that happening? Okay, they're not that great. But here's what I want us to see from this whole story. Look at how big God is. This is the sovereignty of God at work. This is how God works. He's so big and he's so intricately involved in every single detail of our lives. And I never want us to forget about that. This is a God who turns the hearts of people. If you're saying, God, I need my child or my husband to come to Jesus, then you need to pray that God turns their heart. God, I really need that job, but it's between me and someone else. God, would you turn their hearts? God, I really need this. Would you turn their heart? That's what God does. He's that big. He turns the hearts of people. Then, I wonder how this went. She probably had to tell her father, Pharaoh, and now we know how big of a deal he is, that she just adopted a Hebrew baby boy. Imagine that scene. I always wonder if she was afraid. I thought this was cute. I'm not even going to expect you to laugh at this, so I'm just saying this for me. An elderly woman was waiting in a bus crime-ridden area. A rookie cop came up to her and says, do you want me to wait with you? And she goes, no. She goes, I'm not scared at all. And he goes, well, I'm terrified. Can I wait with you? So you wonder if, like for Pharaoh's daughter, if she was so afraid that she needed her entourage to come with her, because you just don't know like what this was going to look like. Like, hey, Pops, guess what? Guess what I did today? I was out bathing, and all of a sudden this baby like comes by, and I just picked him up, and guess what? You're a grandpa. I adopted him. Okay. Oh, and by the way, don't worry. I know you're trying to kill those babies, and he's kind of one of those that you're trying to kill, but whatever, we're fine. And now Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, has an adopted grandson that's a Hebrew. And yet God was right in the midst of the entire thing. That is God's providential care over everyone. And we say, oh, that's just Moses. He says, no, that's you. If you are a follower of Jesus, he's that intricately involved in your life too. He has a plan for your life. He wants you to do things in your life. We just got to get to know him and trust him and release what we want and give it to him. So Jochebed kept Moses for probably, some people think 3 years, some people say 7. Nobody really knows. But maybe during that time, she taught him little nursery rhymes about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Maybe she taught him little songs about like the promised land and how there's a land out there that's ours. And maybe she kept telling him this in his head so that he would remember that one day he would not be an Egyptian. He really was a Hebrew. But then there came that day that she had to let him go. And I cannot imagine the heartache that she felt. Most here are mothers, and you cannot imagine giving your child up for something like this. She knew she would give him over to a godless culture. She knew she would be giving him up to a culture that never even believed in the one true God. And all she could do was release him and trust that God would take care of him throughout the whole thing. Verse 10, when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. I think of that time, like she dresses him up in his little suit and tie, and she's holding his hand, and she's walking him up to the palace. And you have Miriam, who's probably sobbing her little 8-year-old eyes out or 10-year-old eyes out. Aaron, who this has been his little baby brother for all these years, and mom and dad are probably just distraught. And they hand him over, and you wonder what Moses thought. Like, here's my mom and my dad and my brother and sister, and what do you mean you're giving me up to someone else? And did he feel abandoned? I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. But here is what I have learned about being a mother. Someone said this: mothers begin saying goodbye to their children from the moment the children are born. And I think that's true. Unless your child lives with you until the day that you die, we are preparing our children to get up and get out of the house. But it is so heartbreaking. This summer, Cheyenne had a boyfriend, and she ended up breaking it off with him. And I don't care who breaks up with who. When you have children and they break up or they get broke, whatever, it's heartache. And she's sad and she cries, and I was sad and I cried, and your whole motherhood is just, it's hard. And then in the midst of this, Dusty had his that contest I told you about. He goes out for this contest. He's working out for 3 months. They had 25,000 people that signed up for this contest, and it's literally a before and after picture. And you're this way, and then you work out and go on this program, and the top 10 are picked. The day, and we knew he was going to win. Like, he looked great, and it was just, that's what mothers do. But the day that they picked the winners, he was in the backseat of the car, and they were naming him off. Tom, Linda, Carl, blah, blah, blah. And they got to the 10th, and Dusty's name was not one of them. And he was so brave. He was like, Mom, it's fine. It's fine. His heart's broken. It's fine. It was all for me, and I did good. I got healthy, and that was good. And I got out of the car and walked down the stairs, and I burst into tears. And he's like, what's wrong? Like, you have no idea how hard it is to be a mother, okay? It just is. And you know that if you're a mother, it's like everything your kids are going through just hurts your heart so bad. We were watching, Dusty and I were watching a movie, The Miracle, the one with the little girl who fell in the tree, that whole thing. And she was in the hospital, and Dusty goes, Mom, how do parents do this? And I said, don't have kids, okay? That's how you stop that. You just don't have children, and then your heart never hurts. But I realized that you and I have to hold our kids loosely in our hands. And for a lot of us, our grandchildren the same way. We say, God, they're yours. I want them to come to know you. I want them to know you. I'm going to raise them, talk to them. But you know what? Ultimately, God, they're yours, just like Jochebed had to do with baby Moses. Whatever God is asking you to release, I want you to take that leap of faith and do that. That's hard. Jesse, our son, when I would not have a daughter-in-law named Hannah today if, in fact, Jesse did not press the send button. He was trying to ask her out on a date. It was back when, a long time ago, when there wasn't texting, but there was emailing. And he was emailing her a letter that he wanted to go out with her, and he's in high school, okay? We're standing in the back behind him, and we're like, hit the send button. Hit the send button. And he was terrified. And he's like, what if she rejects me? See, so many of us are so afraid to step out and do something because we're so afraid of being rejected. I don't want to apply for the job because they're just going to say no. I don't want to go out with a guy because they're just going to say no. And once again, I'm going to be rejected. And here's what I want you to know. Stop it, okay? It doesn't matter. When God is involved in your life, when you are a child of God, it doesn't matter. God is moving you to the places that you need to be. Here's what I want you to know. When you do step out, God always has the right to say no. And go into everything saying, God, here's the deal. This is what I'd like. I'm going to do this. I think it's from you. But if you say no, that's fine. Because that's how big our God is. He's protecting us. I'll end here. We're selling our house, and we've lived there for 25 years. We found a house. We were starting to go to a church out in Fountain Hills, long way away from us. We decided to go to the church there, and then we decided we need to move to Fountain Hills. So we found a house. We got a realtor. We ended up going to see the house, and we're like, yes, this is the most perfect house ever. And as we were walking out, the house had just got on the market. There was another real estate agent with some more people looking at the house behind us. And Rob's like, oh, Lisa, this isn't going to be ready for us until our house sells. And I'm like, nope, this is our house. I know it is. I'm in the name of Jesus, I'm claiming this house, okay? And so I'm just not worried about it at all. And so now it's getting down to where these people want to buy our house, and it's getting closer. And we thought, well, we better go out to Fountain Hills and check one more time to make sure we like the house. And of course, guess what? I'm sorry, it's been sold. Cash offer. 3 days gone. And I looked at Rob, and he looked at me, and I'm like, well, what just happened? And it was like, God said, no, that's not where I want you. So now we're looking at a house that's 40 minutes from there on a completely other side of town. But you know what I'm doing? I'm not clinging to this house any longer. I'm saying, God, here's the deal. If you don't want us in that house, I need you to sell it out from underneath us. See, that's what happens when we really honestly just give everything up. We're just not worried about it. We're not worried about rejection. We're not worried I'm going to lose the house. We're not worried about this stuff. We're saying, God, here, this is your deal. I'm going to do what I can. The rest is up to you. Jochebed came up with a plan. She stepped out in faith, and she left the results to God. And that is all that God asks us to do. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for this story. I can't imagine what it would be like to be Jochebed and have to do what she did with her son. But God, thank you that you've shown us through this story that you are that big. I pray for anyone here that doesn't know you. God, I pray today is the day they say, Jesus, come in my life because I want to know this kind of a God who is that intricately involved in my life. God, I pray for anyone here that doesn't know you that today will be the day they give their life to you. I pray for anyone here who needs to release things. I pray that they do today because I know when I did the peace that comes with that, and I pray for that for each person here and listening to us. In Jesus' name, amen. I want you to make it better. I want you to make it better. And the question is going to be, what if he never makes it better? You see him here. Praise the Lord. Okay, they're hallelujah. And you go, aren't you miserable? No, I'm really not. What do you have that I don't have? Don't shut down. Don't give up. Don't become bitter. Surround yourself with people who love Jesus. But I promise you that I think today you'll be really, really encouraged at the very end because I learned something I never even thought of.